I have to say that the very first time we used the vitrector, the cutter actually seized inside the eye, and that was because there was a kink in it. These instruments need to be handled with care, not just inside the eye but outside the eye as well, because they do bend quite easily. The positioning of the head, as you can see in the right, if you go with a straight head, you get to work only around the macular area, but if you tilt the head away to displace the nasal bridge, you get much better access to the periphery. And as always, whenever you're transitioning to a new technology or technique, initial case selection, go for things that you are reasonably certain that you're going to do a lot of work on it, and then build up as we go on, which is what I did, and we're still in the process of doing that. So my conclusions are that it is fantastic technology. I do expect a lot of people to be adopting this as time goes on, and the application is genuinely wide. Technique does need adapting so that you're able to get around the problems with access. And there is evolving instrumentation, particularly in terms of increasing the strength of the instruments towards the joint with the handle. And all of these together should hopefully allow us to do much better with time. Thank you.
Now to pediatric cases with Eva. And first I want to talk about anatomical differences in pediatric eyes. The younger the child, the more different the eye's anatomy is from the adult one. The eye continues to grow after birth, well past age 10 years. The cornea is less rigid, and the sutures therefore may become loose much faster than in adults. The younger the child, the more difficult it is to predict the correct power of the IOL, even with the ADACNA. And the entire lens capsule is thinner and more elastic, making cataract more difficult to perform. There is also modified anatomic relationships. Pars plana is located more anteriorly in children, and the younger the child, the closer to the lens should the site of sclerotomy be. For that, you have a transcranial illumination to determine the site of sclerotomy, and you can use the endolaser illumination probe with the scleral depression that we have with the EVA, and is very interesting to determine that. The vitreous base is larger, and the vitreous is more adherent to the retina and to the posterior capsule than in the adults. So that's why there is some difficulties in that. There is also a dense and homogeneous vitreous gel, and the lens is relatively bigger in the eye, so you have to be careful when you enter in the vitreous cavity. Let's talk about the cases now. There is first a case of congenital cataract with the problem of capsular opacification, and then a case of epicretinal membrane when we saw the difficulty to do the PVT, and then a case of vitreous hemorrhage, complicated X-linked retinoschisis, where the difficulty is now due to the splitting inner wall of the retina. So first, congenital cataract, you see here, it's 8 weeks girls, all girls, which have bilateral cataract, and we need, there is no dilatation, and we need to dilate the pupil. Then we perform the rhexis. It's difficult to have a retroillumination, so that we use the slit lamp to have a good illumination. We do that progressively, and you have to pull the rhexis in the center of the eye, not in the periphery, to avoid the tear going away. And it's also difficult here because of the fibrosis of the just behind the entire capsule. After, you can do a bimanual phacoaspiration. It's to really stand out. And you can see here that the posterior capsule is remains with opacification. As you can see here, there is opacification and there is a cloquet channel remnant. And you can see through the vitreous and it goes to in the surface of the optic nerve. You can see here. So this is a sort of malformation which leads to cataract. Now it's the IOL. You can inject it. I take a hydrophobic IOL, which have a yellow dye. And you can see that it's a little eye because the haptics have to take their place progressively in the bag. So let's take a look about the posterior capsule here, because this is the challenge in these cases. Yes, thank you. Okay. So we have to, with the vitreotome, we have to pass behind the lens. It's a little difficult. And then you have to perform the capsulotomy. You can see the settings here. This is a low cutting rate in order to grasp more pieces of the posterior capsule. We have no infusion because I don't want to have vitreous that comes in the anterior chamber. So we can practice that with a very low aspiration. And then we can do the anterior vitrectomy with a very important cutting rate and an aspiration more important too. The infusion in the case of anterior vitrectomy is as needed. Here the infusion as needed. It's better if there is a certain degree of hypotony. So we take now the epiretinal membrane with a vitreous hemorrhage. This is a young girl of 2 years old, and we don't know, we see only a leukocoria, that's the sign. And we don't know why there is a vitreous hemorrhage. So we eliminate the retinoblastoma first with the echography, and we saw that this is an hemorrhage. So we do posterior vitrectomy. You can see the setting, and it's very important to do a vibration with the bilinear foot pedal. In that case, this is the core vitrectomy, and you can see there is a epiretinal membrane here, which is probably secondary to the vitreous hemorrhage. So it really makes an important wrinkle of the macula, and we try to aspirate the epiretinal membrane, but it fails. In fact, in this case, I should have been, the vacuum mud should have been used. Don't touch the food. Yes, thank you. So I take a forceps and with a passive infusion in order to remove the membrane. The first part of the membrane here has been removed, as you can see, and there is a sort of fibrosis just at the surface of the head of the optic nerve. So we remove that. You can see it's very adherent. So it's the same in the pediatric cases. So that's the reason why it's very difficult to do PVD, even with the good settings for aspiration. And then we finished the operation with a free air exchange in order to flatten the retina at the posterior pole and to avoid vitreous hemorrhage, postoperative hemorrhage. The pressure of air infusion is 25 millimeter of mercury. So this is the last case. This is a vitreous hemorrhage, complicated mixed-linked retinoschisis. So first we have to do a central vitrectomy. This is a 12 years old boy. This is his better eye. So that's the reason why 2 years after the hemorrhage, two months, excuse me, after the hemorrhage, we decided to do this vitrectomy. As you can see here, there is some splitting of the inner retina, so you have to do that gently. Here is the macula, here. And there is some blood under the inner wall of the schisis here. Make the aspiration. So there is a grit hole in the inner wall of the retina here. It's in the inferior part. And finished with a peripheral vitrectomy with self-buckling indentation. The illumination is with a slit lamp. So we have the left hand can buckle the retina. It's better to do the peripheral vitrectomy that you can see here. And then we finished with aspiration of the last bird here. And then it was okay. So in conclusion, for me, EVA is very good for pediatric surgery because of its adaptability. There is a different type of vitreous varying with the age of the patient. This is also adaptability during the same procedure. You can have a PVD to do, a coherent vitreous to remove, and whatever the localization in the eyes, the anterior chamber, the posterior segment, vitreous, lens. This is also a safety machine to have a better control of cutting rate and aspiration flow with the use of bilinear foot pedal.